That's pretty good. Alrighty. I have a plasma cutter from Arccaptain that I'm really excited to open up. I have been wanting a plasma cutter for a while, and Arccaptain hooked me up with this CUT50. So we'll get this thing unboxed. As always, it's always packed really nice and neat and covered in plastic and supported with styrofoam. I love that about Arccaptain. Everything I've ever gotten from them has been packaged so well. Ground cable, air hose. Looks like we have a adapter from 220/240 down to 110. Standard wall plug. That's cool. Man, this thing's long. Ground cable. This here is the airline, which I will show what that's for here in a little bit. And this is the main cutting torch. Look at that. Wow, that's fancy. That's really cool. Alright, so this is everything included. Got the main unit itself, and like I said, there's an adapter here to go to 220, and it has the 220 plug already on it, so you have to use this if you want to hook into a standard wall plug. Got a ground here, airline, comes with 2 hose clamps for the airline. This is the main torch. This is really nice. This plastic piece right here is a safety, so you can hit the trigger or not hit it if you don't want to. So this thing won't accidentally be going off if it's grounded and you accidentally bump into this. So it's a good safety feature. I'm gonna dive into the directions here to see what the setup for the consumables needs to be. But it also has a airline hookup there, as well as the electrical hookup. And then it comes with some stickers, the user manual, which I need to look at. Here's the main unit itself. Got a carrying handle on there. It's got an air regulator and a hookup for the air hose. On-off switch, cooling fan. Here's the front of it. That's the airline hookup. Got a little rubber protector on there. Connect the electrical there and the ground right here, and that uses the standard cam lock that all their products come with. Super easy to hook up. Got your electrical control knob here. Operation mode and preferences, little piece of plastic over the screen. I love it when stuff is fresh and new. So in a nutshell here, plasma cutters operate very similar to the way a welder works, only there's one opposite step. Say when you're MIG welding, it creates an arc which melts metal, and then you're adding line to your weld. You're adding material. Plasma cutting is pretty much like that, only instead of adding material, you're blowing material out of the way. That's how you cut things, and that is why you have to have an air compressor, and that's why there's air line that comes with this unit that gets connected right on the back here, and you have to hook that up to your air compressor, and that's how it blows material out of the way, and then you can cut metal with it. So not only is the CUT50 from Arccaptain easy to use, but it's extremely cost effective, not just for buying the unit itself, but for the cost to run it, which is something sometimes people don't think about. In this case, with the plasma cutter, you have the cost of electricity, and then you have to have an air compressor, and then you have some consumables that you have to use. This unit is $189.99 in the United States and $279.99 in Canada. So it's extremely affordable to get into plasma cutting. But the big thing about plasma cutters and being cost effective is not so much in what this unit costs, but how much it costs to operate it. So I've been going crazy with fabricating projects lately, and I've kind of realized that I have a lot of things I need to start cutting, and it would be so much easier using a plasma cutter. I looked into getting an oxyacetylene torch, and there's reasons those are good, and there's reasons that plasma cutters are better than using an oxyacetylene torch. I decided to go with a plasma cutter because aside from the startup cost of buying the unit, and then you have to have an air compressor, which is an additional cost, but if you already have one, then great. And then you have some consumables that have to be replaced periodically, depending on how much you use the machine. But really, as far as operating costs, what you have is the electricity used to power the machine, power your air compressor, and then the consumables every once in a while. The cost of an oxyacetylene torch is pretty crazy because where I'm from, you have to have the bottles for both the oxygen and the acetylene. You can always buy your own bottles and own them outright, but then you still have to get them filled, and oxygen and acetylene can be really expensive. I'm not cutting anything that's too crazy. In fact, the crazy thing about this plasma cutter is that it can cut more than 1/2 of an inch. I'm not a pro when it comes to plasma cutters, but they have what they call a clean cut or a dirty cut. You can dirty cut, I think, up to 3/4 of an inch, which is insanely impressive. That's some thick metal. If you're cutting metal that's 3/4 of an inch. And you can also clean cut a 1/2 inch, which is also very impressive. This is the ground. It's got the cam lock, which is just a little tiny lobe, so this can only go in here one way. And then you turn it to the right, good and tight. And then with the torch, wow, this is long. This here is the electrical, which goes in like this. Push that in all the way, and then turn this little thing. So that's tight. And then this here is the air line. That's 19 mil. Yep. I'm not going to go crazy, but I just want to tighten this down a little bit. That's good. Since there's air going through this, you want to make sure it's tight since you use air to cut, so you don't want that leaking. Okay, and then the back side here, I'm going to take this clamp, stick that over the end of the hose. So this here is a 6mm socket. I'm going to use that to tighten this clamp down. You don't have to go crazy tight with this, you just want to make sure this hose doesn't come off, or that it doesn't leak any air. That's pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and plug this adapter back in since I'm going to be using 110. So the last time I used a plasma cutter, I used my 6-gallon pancake compressor. I also have a 3-gallon pancake compressor that I've never used with a plasma cutter, but this 6-gallon here, I was able to plasma cut using this air compressor, but I found that it's just too small. It doesn't hold enough air, and it doesn't produce air fast enough to really comfortably run a plasma cutter. So this time I decided to get a 20-gallon vertical compressor. Obviously it has more of a capacity, and I think based on its size it probably produces more air in a certain amount of time over my pancake compressors. So I'm looking forward to using this. So I got to get this out of the box and set up. for hooking up the other end of this air hose, there's a few ways you can do this. What I like to do is I always have extra air fittings around. In this case, I have 2 1/4-inch NPT fittings, one male, one female. These actually fit together like that, and that creates a fitting that has the air part on each end. One end of this will have to go into the air compressor itself. Some of these fittings fit in certain couplers and some don't. One way to test that is to just try to install it. In this case, these are the proper fittings for this coupler on this air compressor. So I know that these are good. I'm gonna stick one end in my vise, just like that. I'm gonna use a little bit of tape here. Got a 14 mil wrench here. It's a lot easier to do this with a vise, but if you had to hold each end, the other end happens to be a 5/8 or the metric equivalent. I think that'll work. Now I'll pretty much just do the same thing we did earlier up at the regulator on the back. Just gonna press this on. Might take a little elbow grease to get this to go all the way on, but it'll go. That'll work. Got my 6mm. Perfect. See how easy that was? They give you plenty of hose here too. That's really nice. And on the air compressor, I can control the amount of air, and there is also a regulator on this as well. Plenty of control there. It's seriously crazy how much hose they give you. Look at that. Wow. That is crazy. I have to get some oil for this compressor, and then we should be ready to go. Alright, so these are my first cuts. I have a piece of plate that is an 1/8 inch thick, 1/4 inch thick, and 1/2 inch thick. It's been a while since I used a plasma cutter, so my technique is pretty bad, but this is the first piece I cut. Cut a little corner out of that, and it cut it pretty easy. Next piece at a 1/4 inch. I cut a little corner off. Again, my technique was a little sloppy, but it did cut it off pretty decent. And then I didn't have the machine on the right settings to be cutting 1/2 inch plate, but I tried it anyways just to see kind of what would happen. Still hot. I had this machine set at its lowest power setting, and then of course I had the power cord was plugged into a 110 volt outlet, so I was not using 220. So on the lowest power setting, I was able to cut 1/8 inch plate, 1/4 inch plate, and not the 1/2. So that's pretty good as far as, you know, running the lowest setting it has. Also, for a very, very long time, I have had a really bad time in this garage. when it comes to welders and plasma cutters and anything that uses a lot of electrical power. So I keep blowing the breakers trying to use this thing even at the lowest setting. That's how bad my electrical is in my garage. And that was a problem I've had before, even at other houses that I've lived at. So in my case, it's really good that I got a bigger air compressor, because there's no way that I could run an air compressor and run the plasma cutter at the same time. So I have to let this build up until it shuts off, which is usually around 120 psi. Then I have to unplug it, turn the plasma cutter on. So it cuts good, but as soon as the air runs out of that air compressor, or it gets low enough that you don't have enough pressure to really blow away the material, then you're not going to have much success cutting metal. So this is unfortunately one of those situations where you need to have good electrical in your garage or your shop, and you need to run your compressor and your plasma cutter at the same time if you want to do continuous cutting, or at least cut, you know, something at a faster pace than normal. Because in my case, it'll take a long time to cut anything, like I said, because I have to run the compressor, shut that off, turn the plasma cutter on, shut it off, turn the compressor back on. And in between all of that, I have to run into my basement and I have to reset my breaker. Unfortunately, my breaker is only a 50 amp, and I was gonna switch it out to a bigger breaker, but the wiring can't support anything higher than 15 amps. Unfortunately, I can't alter my own electrical right now, but I do have a couple places I can take this machine and try it out, because I'm really curious how well this thing does at 220 volts with the power setting all the way up. Let's plug this in. I want to show something. Let's turn this thing on. Really cool display there. Nice and lit up, and it's digital. You can hear it running there. The fan just turned on. So right now it's on 110 volts. It is on the setting where it basically has a cruise control on this gun. So you can hit it one time, hit this one time, and it turns on, and then you don't have to have your finger on it. It'll be on until you hit it again. So it's on that setting. Right now I can only turn the power up to 35, and that's because it's on the 110 option. So these pieces right here that I just cut, I cut these on the lowest setting possible, which is 20 amp, 110 volt. If you change the mode, okay. So this thing must have an auto sense. So if I took this adapter off, this 220 adapter, and plug this plug into a 220 volt socket, this machine would automatically sense that, and it would switch the settings over to 220 instead of 110. And then in that case, you would be able to turn this up way more. Probably go to 50, which is why this thing is called the CUT50, because it goes up to 50 amps and runs 220 power. So, all right, well, I've been testing this CUT50 for a while now. I apologize, I'm not getting any really good cutting footage. I've been trying really hard to film a really good cut, but my electrical panel trips so fast with this machine that I literally can't even cut for more than a few seconds, and then I lose my power. So it's pretty frustrating. That's not Arccaptain's fault that my garage doesn't have good electric in it. Arccaptain recommends that if you're running 110 volts with this machine, just using a standard wall outlet, that you have a minimum of a 30 amp breaker in your electrical panel, which I don't have. I only have 15 amp, and I can't change it to a 20 or higher because my the wiring coming from the basement out to the garage is not large enough for a larger breaker. So yeah, you could change it out anyways, but you know, I really don't want to cause a fire. So I'm gonna have to find somewhere I can take my plasma cutting setup here and give this thing a true test. Only problem is I need a large air compressor as well. So right now at the moment I have kind of limited options with what I can do for this. Alright, so I'm back here in my garage after finally being able to do a proper test on this Arccaptain CUT50 Plasma Cutter. If you've made it this far into this video, I appreciate it, and I hope you stick around till the end. I wanted to talk about this thing a little bit before I end the video. So basically, I've had this unit for, it's got to almost be 2 months now, and I've had nothing but issues trying to use this plasma cutter. Basically, what it boils down to is that I don't have the proper electric here in my garage to run this machine. I could talk for hours about electric and power demand and tips and tricks and this and that and whatever, but basically the problem I'm facing with this machine is I don't have proper electric in my garage. I cannot use this machine in my garage. Even on 120 volts at the lowest power setting this thing has, I cannot cut more than a few inches of the thinnest material without my breaker getting tripped inside of my house. Now, I know everybody's gonna say a million things about changing out your breaker or little tips and tricks you can do in your garage to try to get things to not trip the breaker and yada yada. Trust me, whatever you're thinking, I've already thought of it. I've looked into it. It's complicated. With that being said, I want to answer 2 questions here for you if you're watching this video. Question 1, is this a good plasma cutter? Question 2, should you buy one? Answer to question 1 is easy. Is this a good plasma cutter? It's an excellent plasma cutter. It's a great plasma cutter. It's fantastic. I'll say it again. This is an Arccaptain CUT50 Plasma Cutter. It is an excellent plasma cutter. I have been using Arccaptain products for a long time now. I've used quite a few welders. This is the first plasma cutter I've ever had from them. Sitting over there on my my little tool cart there, that is an Arccaptain MIG-130 flux core welder, and that is my favorite welder I've ever had. It's not the best welder I've ever used, but it's my favorite. And it's because that machine welds so good for a little flux core welder. It's so cheap to operate. The consumables and the wires cheap. You know, you can run it on a standard wall outlet, 120 volts. It works fantastic, and no matter how much I throw that thing around and beat it up and abuse it and do things improperly that leads to damage because I'm an amateur at this stuff, it just keeps going. And that alone has just completely sealed the deal on my thoughts on Arccaptain for a very long time. I love Arccaptain, and that's an awesome welder. I expect nothing less than excellent products from them, and that's what they deliver every time. So, answer the first question, yes, it's a good plasma cutter. The important question here, though, is should you buy one? It's complicated. You know, if I would have known that my electric in my garage here, you know, would not be enough for this plasma cutter, things may have been different. Might not have gotten one. So it's definitely a buzzkill that I can't use this in my garage right now. I am going to try to fix that in the future here, near future actually, because I need to get something figured out. I've already looked into the electric. I have a 15 amp breaker. I have a very small electric wire going from my basement, from my panel out to my garage. I cannot put a larger breaker in. It's just the wire that's in the ground right now. It's not, it needs to be upgraded. It's not correct. But I might at some point trench in a new line outside. It wouldn't be that hard to go through the foundation or through the footer, whatever you call that thing, the sill plate or whatever. I know there's a way I can get a wire out through, you know, the basement, go underground, come out to the garage here and wire in good electric. I might do that. Another thing too is that I've thought about getting a large gas generator to put right outside of my garage here, and then just run it, you know, when I'm doing some welding or using the plasma cutter or if we had a storm and I needed some lights on, or you know, some tools out here. I don't know, just for whatever reason I thought about getting a generator. I already bought a used Duro Power 3500 watt generator, way too small, will not even run the famous Arccaptain MiG 130. I don't know if it's just, you know, the output of that thing, or its age, or whatever. I don't know. That thing doesn't work. Forget about it. I need a much larger generator. Those are expensive. I can't seem to find the right deal on a used one. So those are my two options right now, and I'm kind of stuck with both of them. I'm glad I have this machine because I will get that figured out, and I will really enjoy using this machine. If you do not have the ability to put in a new line, or you don't want to pay somebody to do it, or you don't want to buy a large generator, definitely check your electric first before buying one of these. And I'll just say it right now, it's not Arccaptain's fault if you don't have good enough electric to run this machine. It's not their fault. So definitely check that before buying one of these. If you check your electric out and you do have good enough wiring, even 20-25 amp breaker, you know, with decent size wiring and everything, definitely give it a shot. You'll have a much better chance with that size than me running a 15 amp breaker on tiny wiring. So should you buy one, that's totally up to you. If you have the electric though, I think this thing should suit your needs just fine. I was completely blown away by how well this thing cuts. And you know, after me messing around with this thing for almost 2 months, trying to get good cuts out here in my garage without running into my basement every 20 seconds, resetting the breaker because it trips so much. This machine just trips it constantly because that's how bad my electric is. 120 volts, the lowest power setting this thing has. Thinnest of metal. It would still trip my breaker 2, 3, 4 seconds into a cut. It was awful. I was able to give this thing a proper test at a relative's house. That's what you saw earlier. I got the pieces that I tested out, cuts on up here on my bench. I'll show those in a second. The house that I went to test this thing properly at, they had a 240 volt wire that was specifically put in for welders and stuff like this. Really long wire too, so you can like take a welder, you know, all the way out into the yard if you need to. But anyway, they had 240 volt electric that I powered this unit with. They also had a 240 volt Case Ingersoll 60 gallon air compressor. So, you know, large storage capacity of compressed air, and the motor on it it's fast. It charges up air really fast. So it's like a perfect setup for this machine. Having, you know, a good air compressor and 240 volt power service for this unit. So it was amazing seeing the difference between me struggling in my garage and then using this in a proper place with proper electric, because this thing does an amazing job. I didn't have a lot of time, so I kind of grabbed some just test pieces and just gave it a shot. And you know, I'll say right now, I don't use plasma cutters often, so my technique is, you know, far from being acceptable, but I knew this thing would do just fine on thin material. This is about 1/8 of an inch. And it cut right through it. It was, you know, like nothing. And I ran a few different pieces, you know, just not only to try to, you know, figure out a halfway decent technique, but just to kind of see what it would do. It does a great job with 1/8 inch steel. I did cut 1/4 inch steel in the beginning of this video when I first started kind of using this machine. And it cut 1/4 inch pretty well. But what really amazes me here is that, and I'm not good at using plasma cutters, but look at that cut. This is 1/2 inch steel. I accidentally fused these together. I welded them together even though I was cutting through them. But look at that. I'm sorry my GoPro doesn't like adjust very well to that, but just amazing to cut through material that thick out of a machine that's this affordable. To have results like that, pretty awesome. So that really got me pretty optimistic for the future, because I can't tell you how many projects I've done where I got to cut thick steel and would have loved having a good plasma cutter to do these projects, and now that I kind of know what I need to do, I have one, and I'm gonna definitely be using it on projects in the future. The thing about cutting 1/2 inch steel for me is that my go-to for the longest time has always been an angle grinder with a cutting wheel on it. Does it work? Yes. Are there issues with these? Yes, there are. Number one being, in case you don't know, grinders are death machines. They are so dangerous. The fact that I still have both of my eyes and I don't have any huge scars on my face is amazing, because I've had some terrible things happen with these grinders. No matter how careful you are with these, stuff still happens, and when it happens with a grinder, it's dangerous. These wheels explode. You have a loose fitting shirt, pants, whatever, and you're not paying attention, it'll rip your shirt to shreds, and it'll pull this thing right in and start cutting you up. They're just dangerous. Aside from that, they're loud. I live in a neighborhood. I know my neighbors absolutely hate it when they see me walk outside with this in my hand, because they're about to hear this thing for the next hour. If you're trying to cut 1/2 inch steel, it takes a while for a grinder like this. I have a corded grinder as well that does a little bit better, but it still takes a while to cut stuff like this. I have a bandsaw that will cut this. It takes forever, and it dulls up my bandsaw blades. So you kind of got to pick your poison on what you want to use to cut, you know, thick steel. But this thing didn't take much effort at all, or time. It cut it really well. Obviously, you don't cut a perfectly flat cut like you would get from, you know, certain chop saws and just whatever fixed mounted things that would cut really clean. This is a pretty clean cut though for somebody who doesn't use a plasma cutter. You know, that's acceptable to me. I could cut quite a bit of 1/2 inch steel with this plasma cutter, and then I would be more than happy to go along this edge with a grinding disc and just smooth it out, make it a little bit nicer, whatever. I'm not doing projects where you have to have like tight tolerances and stuff like that. It's just, I don't need it for that, but it does an excellent job cutting thick material. That's what I'm trying to say. It sure beats, you know, using a grinder and a lot of other different things, and honestly, it's safer. It's no different than kind of welding. You need, you know, gloves, eye protection, maybe even use some sleeves so you don't burn yourself. Obviously, you know, there's splatter sometimes, you got to watch that, but for the most part, it's pretty safe. Definitely a lot safer than one of these, in my opinion. But it does a great job cutting material. So if you're looking to cut really thin stuff to 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch, it'll do it. And it'll do a good job as long as you have the proper electric. I do believe there's clean cutting and dirty cutting when it comes to plasma cutters. I would consider all this to be dirty, but if you have good material and good technique, I believe you can cut larger than 1/2 inch, which I would really like to try that. I don't even have steel thicker than 1/2 inch for me to even test this machine on, but it does say you can. I've seen on both YouTube and, you know, all kinds of different websites that people are cutting some pretty thick stuff, and they managed to get it done with one of these machines. So it works great, and it's just, I'm looking forward to using this in the future. So you do got to consider, you know, there's some costs associated with it aside from from just having the proper electric in your shop, your garage. I bought that 20-gallon McGraw air compressor in preparation for this machine, either before or after I got it, I can't remember, but I used to have a 6-gallon pancake compressor. I upgraded to this 20-gallon. It produces a little bit more air than my pancake compressor did, or it produces it faster, and then obviously it has a larger tank, so it holds more compressed air. I knew that I wasn't even gonna try to have my air compressor on at the same time as this plasma cutter. So I'd have to compress air till it shuts off, and then I would unplug the compressor, only run this, and I would use my air until it ran out of air, and you can tell when it runs low on air supply. It doesn't cut as well. And then I would just, you know, shut this off, turn that back on. I will deal with that all day long if that's what I had to do for this operation. Obviously, my electric doesn't run this machine. But that is a cost that you kind of have to think about. You have to have an air compressor, and you know, I really wouldn't want to go with anything much smaller than what I have there. So there's that cost. You have the cost of consumables, which is whatever. That's not bad at all. You kind of, you know, if you're running 240 volts, you might have to buy some adapters, and you know, there's different ends on 240 for different things, whatever. They do give you this, so it has the 240 plug wired into it already, and this is an adapter to go down to 120. And obviously, you know, it doesn't work in my garage, but the cost associated with this, really all you're out is, you know, maybe the initial cost of getting yourself an air compressor, and then your electric bill and your consumables, and that's practically it. You know, if you're running any other type of tool, you know, cutting wheels, bandsaw blades, abrasive discs, you know, chop saw, all that stuff, it wears out fast, and you got to buy quite a bit of it. And then if you're cutting large material, you're gonna fly through these wheels. So your operating cost for something like this really isn't bad at all. And you know, I've been looking into getting an oxyacetylene torch. That's a whole other story. There's things that are better about oxyacetylene torches over stuff like this. Obviously, you don't have to have electric, but you do have to get oxygen, you do have to get acetylene, you do have consumables there, you do have the tanks, whether you lease them or you buy them. You know, they run out pretty fast. Oxyacetylene tanks do, or certain different sizes run out faster, but obviously, you know, there's pluses and minuses to plasma cutters and oxyacetylene torches and cutting tools. I could have a video hours long talking about all that, but to answer the question of should you get one of these, that is totally up to you. Do I recommend one? If you have the proper electric, get yourself an Arccaptain CUT50 Plasma Cutter. They're awesome. I'm really looking forward to using this in the future. I have a gazillion projects planned. I have so many projects that I just like am busy 24/7, but I'm really looking forward to using this thing, fabricating some stuff in the future. So if you watch this whole video, I really appreciate it. I try to put out videos that are both informal and entertaining. I'm sure the entertaining part, not so much. But I hope what you got out of this video is that Arccaptain makes good products. This thing cuts really well, and even a very inexperienced person like myself, when it comes to fabrication, welding, cutting, whatever, blah blah blah, can use this thing pretty easy. So I'm at least happy with my cuts. So you got to spend money if you want to do this type of do-it-yourself stuff, fabrication, whatever. I'm always doing projects. I'm always building things, welding things, cutting things for my garden tractors. I got a dump trailer thing coming up in the future. I got my mini excavator. I make attachments. I fix things. If you want to do the do-it-yourself stuff, you got to spend some money, and you want to get the most bang for your buck. If you get an Arccaptain CUT50 Plasma Cutter, you're going to be getting your money's worth. So big shout out not just to Arccaptain for making awesome products that are affordable, but they've also been communicating with me with this machine, because for a while I was paranoid that maybe something was wrong with the machine and not my electric. It is 100% my electric in this shop that's causing the issues. They were very friendly about it, very helpful and supportive, answered all my emails and all my tech questions. Very, very good company to work with. I'm always happy with them, and I guarantee you, you will be too. So, but anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and end this video. Yes, it's a good plasma cutter. I recommend getting one. I think you'll enjoy it. So stay tuned. In the future, I will have more content with this plasma cutter. I'm looking forward to using it. I'm looking forward to getting my electrical problem solved, whether, you know, I trench in a new line or get a generator, whatever. Stay tuned for that. I'll show you what I do there. But I really appreciate everybody watching my videos and supporting my channel and supporting the companies that provide these awesome products to do-it-yourselfers like myself. So thank you everybody for watching. If you enjoy my videos, please subscribe. I appreciate it. And like always, thank you so much for watching.